Now, you know, in the course of your conversation, you talked about financing of, if some of these sectors, that's some of these industries or the sectors that actually make up the real sector, like manufacturing and agriculture, get proper financing, then maybe, things will be a little better than they are right now. Let's look at what these sectors were actually allocated in the budget. Not so much, not even up to 32 billion naira was actually allocated to this sector. That's a piece now. And like I said, these are actually the sectors that are supposed to grow the economy because they fall under the sector we'll call the real sector. Are these figures actually reflecting the passion to create more jobs?
I don't think we should look at the budget that way, because that 32 billion mainly centers on, I think, more of recurrent expenditure of that department. Now, that is not going to create growth from there. Now, but what I see of the government is that they've moved majority of those business decisions or those support to Bank of Industries or the support of agriculture through the commercial banks and Bank of Industry or CBN, which I think is a more laudable approach. Because if you look at it, the last disbursement, which was the figures that are given out by BOI, was that they've given out over 213 or 30 billion to the agricultural industry. So the disbursement has already been made, so they've already got it. The disbursement for even the industry, the last one, has already started. Now, the way to approach it is the right way. It's not true. I would never say a ministry should be the one disbursing money, because it really goes haywire. Now, but in terms of Bank of Industry, in the terms of other infrastructural banks, that is their job. They're to analyze the risk, they're to analyze the project, and they're to give out the funds. They are giving it out. Let's be fair on them. They are giving it out. People that have benefited from it are there. We are beneficiaries of it. Even under non-sectorial issues, you're still having the Bank of Industry supporting it outside the CBN or outside the government. Now, if those banks are actually doing what they're supposed to do, unfortunately, if you look at the figures from the CBN, out of about 6 infrastructural banks, it's only the Bank of Industry that is turning out a profit. The rest are not. It's a loss maker. But for the one that is even turning out a profit, are they giving out this money? I believe they are. A lot of people, maybe they need to be more approachable. I've had this discussion even with the Bank of Industry. I said, look, you need to move away from this, we don't believe we can get it, to you need to make yourself accessible.
But yes, they do make themselves accessible.
They do, but they need to make it more accessible. I don't see a Bank of Industry in every corner of the country. I see it in sections. So, but they're doing their job. That's the good thing. We're actually seeing the benefit. We are seeing where they see. I'll give you an example. This is one we're doing, which is the first in West Africa. And this is supported also by Bank of Industry, supported by the commercial banks also, 2 of the commercial banks. And one of the key things which I got out of this when the Bank of Industry, one of them actually said, what you're doing is now in the interest of the nation, not for anybody else. It's what you're actually putting in place as a factory is now a national interest issue, and we should actually be seen to be supporting it 100%. Now, that tells you that they're doing what they're supposed to do. That even if there's some things that are commercial, but it's also a national interest issue, we should be seen to have, from a banking perspective, from a government perspective, have pushed that industry to do it.
But Mr. Anofawokon, because you're almost medium to a large industry, that works for you. What happens to such industries that are regarded as micro or small?
That is where I come in, that they need to actually change their sectorial, regional basis and make it a bit more simple, so that I, as Joe Bloke, coming from outside, that want to set up a small 200,000 naira cottage.
In fact, it might not even be up to 200,000. Some businesses don't require that much.
The problem is access to those type of funds. Really, today, in the word of a banker, is divine intervention. Really, and it's a sad thing. Now, because if I don't know who you are, I don't have a collateral, I don't have all your family history, really, even to give you 50,000 naira is the guy's job on the line, because most likely the bank will take it out of that bank worker. So the problem is we need to move away from divine intervention to government intervention. So what gives this 50,000 naira to this guy is where the government needs to come out with policies that will start it. Yet there are things that they have done, but how many people are getting it? What is the result of those things? What is the chain effect? Because if we don't see people getting it and actually doing something with it, it shouldn't be national cake. I shouldn't go and collect 50,000 from the government. I know it's part of my national cake. I should see that 50,000 as I'm creating employment for myself and the next person.
Okay, but does that person actually necessarily have to wait for the government to intervene? Why can't the private sector intervene? Why can't we, for instance, see a stronger linkage between the public and the private sector to actually ensure that, this real sector, which they're actually trying to build to the extent that it can begin to foster growth and create jobs, is actually a workable project? Because you see, as much as possible, the government should hands off business. We agree.
I agree.
But you see, the government has to make the policies
Yes.
that will ensure that there's an enabling environment for a private investor to come and invest their money.
Okay.
But looking at it now in this context, how can everybody have a win-win situation?
Okay, you have microfinance banks. That we have not even looked at. The microfinance banks, even under this new CBN policy, are supposed to even get part of that fund. Now, the microfinance bank's duty really is to give those 10,000, 20,000 naira funds. Now, unfortunately, even microfinance banks want to become commercial banks, which is also part of the problem. The whole ideology of microfinance is also fizzling out because the microfinance bank believe they should also be everywhere in the country. Now, but if they're everywhere, but they're doing this 50,000, 10,000 naira participation, I'm going to have the guy in the market going there with a small store collecting 5,000 naira, 10,000 naira. That is their job. It is not the commercial bank's job to be giving 5,000 naira. The whole creation of the system, which was to have commercial banks, microfinance bank, is to allow the access to the actual 5,000 naira customer. Now, how do we get this guy to actually keep going there? To be starting a small store? Nigerians are very entrepreneurial. We are. If you go everywhere, someone, even if they're working with you, they're doing something on their own. Now, so you cannot take that out of us. We are entrepreneurs. We're born entrepreneurs. We're born traders. We're born manufacturers. But we just need the incentive to get that spirit out of us. So is that incentive is where the government needs to play and continue to force it down to this small scale. Yes, they need to use those financial houses. They need to use the commercial. They need to use the microfinance. They need to use their own banks, which they have, whether loss-making or not. Let them create the jobs.
Well, the government is constantly making strong efforts to ensure that all the policies and all the enabling environment that private investors actually need, and as well as small businesses need, actually comes to play. Of course, we see the recent thing in power and all the rest. But let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we've actually got some tweets from some of our viewers, and we'll take a look at some of them and continue our conversation. You're still watching Business Morning on Channels Television, and we're broadcasting live from Lagos, Nigeria. Today on the program, we're looking at the role of the real sector in forging inclusive growth and creating jobs. And I have here with me in the studio an industrialist and the managing director, CEO of Coleman Wires and Cables, Mr. George Onofo. Welcome. He's going to be here with me when I come back in just a moment. Please join us again.